Um, so I guess I'm the cleanup batter here for an interesting session. Let me thank the organizers for the chance to attend this conference again and think about the issues which I think all of us in this room are convinced are important. I'm going to preface my remarks on this topic by referring and channeling to an important contemporary philosopher. Some of you may recognize the quote. I'm afraid I can't possibly do the accent. I think everybody in this room is convinced that we're seeing something, very real and very important, and we've been seeing it now for several years, and we're at that kind of point where probably, these new technologies are really starting to get kind of significant traction in the economy, as opposed to being something which is largely of academic interest. I obviously don't believe that that he who is without sin cast the first stone. I obviously don't believe we should call a halt on actual speculation, since much of it is informed and supported by a lot of work that's been done elsewhere in thinking about the impacts of new technologies on the economy. But I do kind of feel a little bit worried in our conversation as a community that it's the blind men looking at the elephant. We've got little scraps and pieces and intuitions and about what's going on in terms of development, diffusion, and kind of substantive uptake in the economy of AI. So I really welcome the three papers I was invited to take a look at, or projects perhaps, some aren't quite papers yet. And I'll think about where does this fit into what we know, what we might like to know. We're at the point where I think where everybody's interested in trying to quantify and get a statistically well-founded handle on what is going on in terms of commercial development and adoption and production use of AI technologies. And where could you go to look for this kind of information? Well, it's going to be hard to see in government-generated statistics. We could think about doing surveys. So Jim talked about an interesting and timely effort to look at a particular part of the AI ecosystem. I welcome that. Christina talked about the government, the Bureau of the Census, or other entities could help us by taking a much more kind of broad-based and representative look at where these technologies are getting footprints. And so surveys is something, if we're trying to follow something in real time, we probably have to start, we have to go to these things. I don't know we have many other options. Another place we can go to look is the footprint of these technologies in factor markets. So Sunny has I think a very interesting glimpse into the market for relatively specialized kinds of labor, who are clearly really important inputs to AI. We could be looking at venture capital and other databases that collect money on who's investing in what, and that might tell us something about investment, financial capital deployed in this area. Other things that I think we could be thinking about tracking and trying to understand would be IP broadly defined. What kinds of whether protected by formal intellectual property rights or the fuzzier stuff, know-how and so forth. And that's clearly an important input. A lot of that is being generated in places like, e.g., the University of Toronto. So that kind of academic effort in generating this stuff, the OpenAI initiative, there's lots of things going on in that area. An important kind of input to the activity of trying to make money out of AI is surely data. So this is a tricky and complicated question about ownership rights, access to governance of the kinds of large-scale data sets that may be necessary to bring, realize value from these technologies. Other places we can go, this type of, any new technology tends to leave, I'm calling them footprints here on this slide. There's things like patent filings, publications in the open literature, people posting code on public websites and so forth. I think it's probably also clearly value, especially for students looking to find ideas and interest, is the conferences, trade shows, trade press, websites. We get to see a preview of what's coming in that area, and then there's also the media discussion more generally. So we can do, and I think we're starting to do a good job of engaging in who's doing it and at what scale. That's all good. Turning to the right-hand column here, what we may care about, especially in terms of thinking about policy questions or advice to policymakers, is finding ways to track the outcomes and the impact of this kind of activity or diffusion and uptake of this technology. The thing I certainly probably care the most about is thinking about productivity and technical change. How can we be following that? Another thing we could look at is the emergence of as yet unseen new kinds of products and services. With certainly a lot of time has already been spent thinking in the context of robotics, thinking about employment, wages in the sectors which are being big investors in industrial automation and manufacturing. We could also, I think, relatively straightforwardly just by try to track what's the impact in AI-intensive sectors on industry structure, incumbents versus entrants, entry-exit dynamics, and so forth. Tracking productivity is the one which gives me the most heartburn. As long as I've been hanging around the NBER, there have been serious, committed, thoughtful efforts to try to measure productivity in services. And, Jim, you can cover your ears, but I'm afraid to say that all that effort, really I don't think moved the ball down the field very far. It turns out to be extraordinarily difficult, for example, to meaningfully measure productivity in banking. And if we think that a big consequence of these technologies like machine learning is going to be changing what's going on in the back office of large financial institutions, we're already way deep in over our heads in trying to think about, can we measure the pace of change, technological change in the service sector? This for me just kind of doubles it up, and boy, wouldn't it be helpful to try to be thinking about investing and thinking now about those problems. I'll just close off my remarks by thinking about my reaction to the three presentations you just saw. Let me start with the Besson et al. Survey. It's early days, it's ongoing. This data set I think is growing every week, right, Jim? A couple of things I pulled out of here which I thought were very interesting. One is the sectoral breadth. As Jay mentioned at lunch, I'm kind of convinced myself at least that AI is a general purpose technology, so it's good anytime I find a factoid which suggests that it's broadly used across the economy. The point about developers leveraging the customer's data, not their own or third parties, is a useful piece of information. I'm not sure that the Crunch-based population of firms really have any other alternative, and I don't know that this particular data point helps us think about, could you start up, say, a social media-based advertising platform and compete against it in any meaningful way on the terms of the capability of AI-supported products and services. But that's, it's great to have something. Christina, when do we get there? Where's the data? Can we see it? When do we get there? You know, I think it's great that MOPS, you guys got those questions into the MOPS, and I eagerly anticipate seeing what comes out of it. Lastly, Sunny's paper about the machine learning, or the workforce who might be offering machine learning type skills as an input. You know, that's nice. I think it's really good to kind of reinforce our instinct that again, it's a widespread kind of phenomenon, and that ML and other kinds of AI technologies are strongly complementary with domain expertise. So it's nice to have that kind of concrete documentation. I'll leave off with the remark. I mean, one of the things I really like about Sunny's paper is that, you know, one of the charts that went by, you could see what was happening versus use of SQL or other, you know, the hot technologies from 30 years ago. I think the benchmarking here is critical. I think if Christina's paper, I think, makes this, you know, some very good points. How should we be thinking about AI looking back at, you know, internet and networking? You know, for example, are we, you know, is this going faster, deeper, wider? You know, only through kind of good luck did we have, you know, people like Shane starting with, you know, 56K modems and so forth that gave us some tracking of what had happened. I don't know we did a good job as a research community in getting on the problem and thinking it through in real time. Most of our understanding, you know, Eric was one of the people who pioneered kind of, well, the government's not helping us with data on IT, so I'm just going to go and get some from other sources. Now, those were hard-learned lessons, and I hope that we kind of take them to heart and build them into our collective research effort on this topic. Thank you.